Hello, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the final update of the year for forms changes. I am Cindy Stanton. I've been your Forms Committee, Residential Forms Committee Chair, along with Addison Russell, our General Counsel. We've got some good things to share with you today. Before we get started, however, this has been quite a year for forms, and I would like to express heartfelt gratitude to all of our committee members who served. We had a lot of meetings this year. We had a lot to get done. Thank you for your service. I just wanted to take a second and recap. The goal of the committee at the beginning of this year was really simple. We needed to update our forms so that we would comply with the NAR settlement. And we were pretty fortunate because our forms were in good shape and there wasn't nearly as much to do in Tennessee as there were in other states. But we did set out to ensure that forms were changed as minimally as possible to create the least amount of disruption for you all, but still ensure that by August 17th, the forms were all ready for you. And I'm very pleased that we did that. Addison and I shared a video mid-year explaining all of those changes, how the committee approached the task of compliance with the settlement. And if you didn't catch that or would like a refresher on it, we do have that available to you on the Tennessee Realtors website. So the purpose of our meeting today is to report on the activities that the committee has made since our last session at the middle of the year. And I will say, we've made very minor changes, but one very exciting change that we can bring forth to you today. We heard your feedback about this request for a simpler document to be used for showing property. A lot of realtors weren't totally comfortable with executing a full buyer representation agreement at the onset. And so the committee went to work again after hearing that. And I'm extremely pleased to share with you all today that we accomplished that goal, and we do have a new touring agreement form. I heard from many members a request that that form be only one page. Can't you do a one-pager for us, committee? And I'm pleased to announce that if you print the new document on the front and on the back, you will have a single page for you to work with your buyers. So let's get started with all that. I'll turn it over to Addison. We'll dig into the packet.
Okay. As Cindy said, we're just going to cover changes that the committee made post the August 17th practice changes, the changes before that. And I will go through the forms one by one, and I think that they're going to appear on your screen as we go through them and those changes. And then a packet will be available following this meeting for you to kind of review. But this is the first release, so just follow along as we go through it. We're going to start with the RF 101, which is the listing agreement. A very minor change took place there, and that's just on that section 7. And this language was new in August, that section where we rewrote the compensation paragraph. An oversight in what came out in August was that we referred to percentage, and we said this percentage shall be taken from the amount agreed to be paid to the listing broker. Obviously, compensation is completely negotiable and can come in a lot of different forms. So that could be dollar amounts or percentages. So we just changed that to amount to reflect that. That was the only change made on this document, and it will carry through to all listing agreements. For our next change, we will go to the co-listing agreement. This isn't really a quote-unquote new change. It's a new change to this form, but it does match changes we made to the listing agreements in August, where we removed MLS participation as a condition of what compensation could be offered for cooperating compensation. And so that's what's happening here on the co-listing form. That change did not happen on this form in August. So to kind of get everything streamlined, we've made it here on the co-listing agreement where we're just removing the reference to MLS participation when it comes to cooperating compensation. And then next we'll go to the buyer rep agreement. You'll see just clean up here on lines 50 and 54. It's not amount listed above because you can put other amounts in special stipulations. It's just amounts herein to take into an all-encompassing view of things that appear in compensation here. And yes, I see there's a question in the chat about, is this being recorded? It is being recorded. So you all will be able to go back and watch it, and then those that didn't make the cutoff, it was a popular event, can watch it afterwards. Okay, and then still on the buyer rep agreement, this section 9, this was a new section last year, I guess, in 2023. We had added this language pursuant to a change in state law. There was a new state law about who can and cannot purchase real property in the state of Tennessee. The law that was passed in 23 referred to sanctioned non-resident aliens and sanctioned foreign businesses. That law was changed in 2024, and the new law will take effect January 1, 2025. So moving into 2025, our forms will mirror the new law, the new language about prohibited foreign parties or prohibited foreign party controlled businesses. If you have buyers that have questions about what that is, who is a prohibited foreign party from purchasing agricultural and non-agricultural land in the state of Tennessee, we have the statutory reference in the document in the buyer rep agreement. So certainly if a buyer has questions, you can refer them to that statute, advise them to speak to their own legal counsel if they have any questions. But we're just trying to make buyers aware that this law is out there, and if they think that they may have questions, they need to do some more researching on that. And so that concludes the buyer rep agreement. And now, sort of for the star of the show today, I guess, is the document that Cindy referenced when we started, and that's the touring agreement document. In August, we did put out a facilitator type agreement that you could have a buyer sign and not enter into an agency relationship with you. That's RF 143, which also allows for a non-exclusive agency relationship. This, though, is simply a touring agreement. It's 2 pages, and you can pin it front and back. And it kind of is just, it's very basic. It will define the parties, the buyer and the broker. It sets a term, which can be 1 day, 2 days, 2 months. You and the buyer can negotiate that there. And then it does talk about compensation, which is required by the settlement to say what your services are worth and how you expect to be paid for that. That just mirrors the compensation section that is in our buyer rep agreement. And the RF 143, that non-exclusive facilitator agreement. If you'll scroll down through there, section 6, I'll point out, is facilitator status. And so this new form will be RF 145, and you will just be having a facilitator relationship with any buyer that signs this. You will not, it is not an agency agreement. So it's simply if a buyer wants to tour a home, this is a more simple document to have them sign to be in compliance with the settlement agreement, but it's kind of whittled down from what we really think is necessary. The buyer warrants there that they're not in an agency agreement and that they are not prohibited from purchasing property in Tennessee pursuant to that statute I just talked about. And then we kind of have just the disclosures that will make the buyer aware that, of these important legal things such as like to be aware of recording devices in property and that you, the licensee, are not an expert in all fields. But then that's it. And then there are special stipulations if you need to customize the document in any way. You sign it, the buyer signs it, and that will be compliant. And so I'm sure there'll be questions on that at the end where we'll take questions, but we'll go on to our next document now, which is the listing agreement, the listing buyer representation mutual release agreement. That's RF 151. And these are minor changes. Again, just really clean up. On line 12, we talk about a cancellation fee. That's been in the document for a while, but it just says that fee is due upon execution. Oftentimes, you may not have that money yet. And so if you sign this document saying that you've received the money and you haven't, that could be problematic for you if you are expecting a cancellation fee and the seller or buyer have agreed to that. So just that money is due upon execution. And then again, it's referenced on line 14 and 15 that the agreement is effective when there has been payment of the cancellation fee. And then we'll go to the property condition disclosure. This is RF 201. This is in here because of a statutory change, the change on here. Section 18 is new, and it asks a seller if they are aware if the location of the property is within an improvement district that is subject to a special assessment and what that rate of special assessment is. There was legislation in 2024 that was the Residential Infrastructure Development Act, and it created these infrastructure development zones where they could utilize certain financing, but the buyers of the property would be charged an assessment, and that assessment can be spread out over different terms. But so this is just to make any prospective purchasers aware that there is an assessment on the property that they are purchasing. So that was just due to a law change there. And then we'll go into the lead-based paint disclosure, which is RF 209. Nothing really changed in the lead-based paint disclosure substance-wise, but the EPA did put out a new standardized form, which is where we take this form. So we just mirrored that new language. Again, of substance, nothing has changed. It was really more of a formatting and how it's formatted differently. But still be prepared to have sellers complete this for the properties that come under the Lead Paint Disclosure Act and provide it to any purchasers. And then same thing for lead-based for rental properties. We just changed that to mirror the EPA's document, and that's RF 210. And here's the disclaimer notice, RF 304. And this document, I'm sure you all know, is provided to consumers to kind of say, like, I, real estate licensee, am not an expert in these fields, but here are some things you should be aware of and that you may want to seek more information on. And so we did change section 16 that used to just be called title expenses, and now it's title insurance expenses. And it's really just to make a buyer aware of the different types of title insurance that may be available, that they can get a standard policy or they can get a homeowner's policy, and then kind of pointing them to where to find more information about those. The committee does not expect you, real estate licensee, to be an expert on those things. So really pointing them to be the source of the source. And this is where you, buyer, can go and learn more about those different types of policies. And then the purchase and sale agreement, RF 401. Just some minimal changes on here. Right there, you'll see on lines 147 and 148, where we're just talking again about the homeowner's title insurance policy, which provides additional coverage. Again, another way to make buyers aware of the different options. And this also makes the seller aware that the buyer has different options available to them in the event the seller has agreed to pay for that policy. And then here in section B, we reference the new law about prohibited foreign party or prohibited foreign party controlled business. Previously, this section did speak to the law, but with the old language, and so here it is in the new language. Go down. Is that it? Oh, that's it. So see, pretty minimal changes, mostly a lot of cleanup, and then we did have some law changes that needed to be addressed in the forms, which we were happy to take on, and then with the new touring agreement. So at this time, I think we can open it up for any questions that you may have. Feel free to put them in the chat, or I think you have the ability to raise your hand as well.
Yeah.
One question is, did we get rid of the old new touring agreement, which was the RF 143? No, that is still available. And I see that being used particularly in non-exclusive relationships, because you will have buyers that want to enter into non-exclusive relationships. And that's a really good form that covers that. And then also, if you wanted maybe a mediator document, that is there for your use as well to create a facilitator relationship. This recap will be available as soon as possible. There our great tech people here are going to do some editing on the back end, but we'll have it up as soon as they can. Bob, I see your question, and I don't think that Cindy and I probably have an opinion on that, but the Forms Committee is continuing to just stay up to date on law changes and what is required, and putting out all the forms that our members may need for tools for membership. Okay, they are flying in now.
Can you speed read, Addison?
Maybe. The question is, have there been discussions to change the listing agreement in the area of co-broke commission sharing for instances where the seller pays the buyer's brokerage directly? This year, and I'm sure Cindy can, what we did prior to August, the Forms Committee this year was focus on what needs to be done pursuant to the settlement. After August, it was not the Forms Committee's intention to let's just change it up. We tried to do cleanup. I think in 2025, maybe the Forms Committee there will kind of see what the real world implications have been of the practice changes and what changes, if any, may be needed. If you have any suggestions, feel free to send those to Andrea Huddleston or Tina, who is the 2025 Forms Committee Chair. And I think that's something the 2025 committee can discuss.
Yeah, I would just add that, when we released these changes, it was such an uncertain time. We weren't exactly sure how, in practice, what would occur. And so the conservative approach with changes was simply to allow us some flexibility to observe how our world was changing. And, this committee meets every month. So as new changes are presented, we also had some uncertainty, not knowing what the DOJ was going to do. Mm-hmm. So yeah, just stay tuned. Forms are always somewhat of a work in progress. Right?
Always. And I think that, some member, and that we really rely on our members, will have a situation that arose, and then we can use that as an example. I see some questions on here that aren't related to the changes we talked about today. And for those questions, feel free to send the question to the hotline, or if you would like the 2025 committee to discuss it, again, you can send those to Andrea or Tina. Should broker compensation agreement still be used since seller is paying buyer broker compensation if agreed to by seller? Do you understand that question?
I think so. I think some of these questions really probably fall more on your managing broker to advise on the way that they want you to practice. The forms are there to allow options. I mean, we still have a compensation agreement for those that want to use that as the vehicle to ensure your compensation. That's perfectly acceptable with the settlement. There was nothing in the settlement that prevented that. But certainly there are other brokers that may want you to always put your compensation in the purchase and sale agreement. So that's maybe not for us to answer necessarily.
I think that's fair. Bob, I see your question about who should those changes be addressed to, and I will ask Andrea to put her email in the chat, and you can send them there. And then Greg is asking about the language for the extended title insurance rather than calling it homeowners coverage. Yeah, I will be honest that we are very fortunate to have 2 title attorneys serve on our committee. I'm certainly not blaming them, but I think we relied on them and their knowledge in that sector. And that also instigated the change as that's what their industry is calling those policies. But if you would like to follow up on that more, I'm happy to connect with them and make sure that is the case. Michael, will watermark versions be made available to prep for training in advance of January 1st? I believe so, yes. So we will put the video and the packet up as soon as possible so that you can work on training in advance of January 1 when the forms without watermarks will be released. If we use the new touring form as a facilitator, would we supplement with a buyer's rep form to become a designated agent for the buyer? Yes, if you want that relationship to change and switch to an agency relationship, then you would need to execute a new form, which could be the RF 141. Or you can continue as a facilitator throughout the transaction if that's yours and the consumer's wish. As far as the change of the special assessment language, is this a TCA statewide minimum assessment or municipality case? It's going to be a local by local case. There's not going to be a rate of assessment was not specified in the statute. So it's going to be where these development districts are set up, infrastructure development districts are set up, and then what that financing will look like, how much money the developer borrowed, and what they're assessing to the buyer. And then that timeline will also differ. Under terminology section, we already did that one. Okay. Oh, please repeat the question. I'm sorry. I will work on that. Are there any other questions? I appreciate all of y'all being here. Like so, it was very well attended. And if you have any suggestions for 2025, we'd love to hear those.